Getty Images has over 80 million photos in its massive database. And out of these 80 million things, the official Getty Images Instagram chose to celebrate someone who was an executioner, a Stalin sympathizer, and someone who swore to kill millions of Americans. The butcher of Alacabana, Che Guevara. Shocking? Not really, because it seems like if you're on the left, these horrific atrocities are merely misunderstood as long as you're a Marxist revolutionary and an anti-capitalist icon. I'm Ben Davies, this is Pure Hollywood. The post was actually a birthday shout out to this psychopathic murderer and had a praising glowing caption to make sure their propaganda wasn't misunderstood. The post said, quote, born 90 years ago today, Ernest Che Guevara expanded his horizons at a young age through travels in Latin America and elsewhere, dedicating his life to liberating the poor and powerless he met along the way. It's no wonder that to this day his iconic visage, the beard, the barrette, the cigar, the intense gaze is emblazoned on protest posters, on t-shirts, and in the hearts of the would-be revolutionaries of every stripe and nationality. In his time, Che was truly a man of the world. And for those of you who know the history of Che Guevara, does it not make your stomach turn that they're posting this? But don't worry, there's hope for these sheep that blindly follow these iconic people of culture that are promoting people like this. Because the post was taken down, presumably after many Cubans who fled that horrific regime contacted them and said, oh wait, he murdered my entire family. And just to put it in perspective of what Che did in Cuba, it would be equivalent to our population in America for one person to murder 3 million people. But the person who was working at Getty Images, you know where their heart was, because they removed the photo and instead put one up of an immigrant child at the US border condemning the US's immigration policy. Regardless, the almost 1 million followers that scrolled through their feed and saw this iconic images of Che Guevara and this praising headline will have a distorted, perverted view of this revolutionary dirtbag, at least for the time being. But that's where the rebel comes in, and that's why your boy took these screenshots. But here's a few things you should know the next time you see some rapper or celebrity donning the image of Che Guevara and what he represents. In Che's actual journal, he wrote, quote, the blank, bad word for black people, is indolent and lazy and spends all of his money on frivolities, whereas the European is forward-looking, organized, and intelligent, unquote. Seems a bit racist, right? Don't tell that to Jay-Z. And this is how stupid the left is too. There was a statue of Che Guevara put in New York City and no one defaced it, but was rather put there in celebration. And I guess they missed this little gem that Che espoused about New York. Quote, if the missiles had remained in Cuba, we would have used them against every heart in the US, including New York City. The victory of socialism is well worth millions of atomic victims, unquote. The beloved Che was also Fidel Castro's executioner, and believe me, he earned the nickname of the Butcher of Alacabana. Here are just a few gems. In a speech he gave in 1966, he said, quote, hatred is an element of the struggle, a relentless hatred of the enemy, impelling us over and beyond the natural limitations that man is heir to and transforming him into an effective, violent, selective, and cold killing machine. To establish socialism, rivers of blood must flow, unquote. It was reported that when Che was the head of these execution camps, in his first year alone, he personally executed 1,000 people. Another writing from his journal, he said, quote, I ended the problem with a .32 caliber pistol right in the side of his brain. A former guard in Che's infamous death camp, Alacabana, the guard said, quote, several men who survived in Alacabana prison recall a night when a 14-year-old boy was shoved into their holding cell. When asked what he did, he gasped and said that he had tried to defend his father from the firing squad but was unsuccessful. They watched out of their cell windows as Guevara took out his pistol, put the barrel to the back of the boy's neck, and fired, unquote. Sounds like a real stand-up guy, right? So then why is this guy praised? Well, first of all, it couldn't possibly be to establish one of the most bloody, miserable countries on planet Earth where people are literally starving, will leave their family and swim through shark-infested waters just to leave it. Maybe you only hear praise because it's the law. According to the Havana Journal for Travel Information, among other things, it's illegal to criticize the Castro regime or the Cuban Communist Party, the only party allowed in Cuba. So that's understandable, but why in America is Che so praised and this idea that he represents? The answer, because of what he actually represents. It's that same postmodern Marxist romanticism that the left constantly pushes, no matter how many innocent corpses that ideology stands on. And the left just eats it up, and that's actually part of the plan. And don't just take my word for it. This is from the actual words of Che Guevara. In an entry in 1952, he said, quote, much more valuable than our rural recruits for our guerrilla force were American media recruits to export our propaganda. It said that Castro and Guevara cultivated and schmoozed the foreign media, that they made it their goal from day one. They needed to export their propaganda and make it not seem like propaganda. Idiots on the left and whoever the person is at Getty Images that posted this birthday celebration are these useful idiots that these psychopaths play like a marionette doll to produce their propaganda. And this is the same tactic used by other murder regimes like the Soviet Union and Mao China. They all use propaganda to cover up the bodies and the corpses lying behind them. And the left media always eats this up because they like some of the ideas and how they sound. Here's the thing. This is the best they got. Strutting out economic countries like Venezuela until it goes completely under. And this newfound affinity for monsters like Joseph Stalin. And the godlike worship of someone like Che Guevara. All they can say is ignore all these horrendous atrocities because they had some good sounding ideas. Or maybe their beliefs just weren't quite tried properly yet. It frustrates me to no end that people will do this and then also not give the same birthday shout out to amazing men and women who lived unbelievable and inspiring lives but whose now legacy is drugged through the mud, whose entire lives are being horribly characterized because of one statement or act. Take George Washington, for instance, a man so honorable and so great in his life that he inspired farmers and commoners to stand up against the greatest military power on the planet. A man so selfless that he slept with his men on the field instead of being in his general quarters. And when George Washington said he didn't want the power, didn't want to be president, an act so uncommon, so unimaginable, that his greatest enemy, King George, said that if he does that, then he would be the greatest man in the world. He did do that, went back home, and only by the begging of all the people who demanded that George would come back and be the first president to lead the freest, most prosperous country ever formed, did he reluctantly take the mantle of being the first president. A man who now protesters are trying to take down his image. Why would they do this? Because for a period in his life, George Washington owned slaves. And forget to mention that he was the only founding father to free every slave that he owned in 1799, almost 80 years before slavery was abolished, and was done through the bloodiest war in American history. Yes, slavery is a blot on the history of all mankind, but Washington's life tells a much greater story than that period of time. However, for Che Guevara in the 1950s and 60s, a lifetime of murders and terrors are forgiven for sake of the narrative of a revolutionary man of the people fighting against the imperial capitalists. This propaganda is insane. We all must try to look deeper than a cute birthday photo. See the lives taken, see the results of the person's actions, see what comes of their beliefs implemented, and speak up when garbage like this is just spewed into the public. Because we do not need another Stalin or a butcher of a la Cabana. We need more people who are willing to walk away from power like Washington so individuals can live in it. I'm Ben Davies, this is Pure Hollywood.
And another fantastic news, you can now download the Rebel app and take me with you wherever you go to get exclusive content in the entire Rebel lineup.